Alyssa Godski. She is a professional triathlete, ultra runner, and endurance sports coach. She holds the record for the fastest known time on the Vermont Long Trail, a 273-mile trail, completing it in just 5 days, 2 hours, and 37 minutes. In 2020, she completed all of the Adirondack 46 high peaks in just 3 days, 16 hours, and 16 minutes. She is a 33-time Ironman finisher and 45-time Ultramarathon finisher. Alyssa, we want to welcome you to the A is A podcast.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, thanks for being on. We're really excited to talk to you about this stuff.
Yeah.
Josh, did you want to jump into like our first questions? I think you knew where you wanted to go right off the bat, right?
Yeah, we have a lot of, beginners that listen to our podcast. And I would like, can you explain to everyone what a full Ironman entails? Because I'm not sure how many people may understand Entails. So what's that look like?
Sure. Yeah. It's a 2.4 mile swim. That's how you start your day in Ironman. And then you go on to 112 miles of biking. And then you finish that with a marathon. So 26.2 miles of running after that.
Wow. Okay. So ultramarathon, how does that vary from a full Ironman?
Yeah. So, ultras and Ironman there's a lot of similarities and there's a lot of differences. Similarities kind of off the top of my head are things like nutrition being super, super important.
Mm-hmm.
Just long days, right? Ultra marathons can be, for most of the population, like 5 to 36 and beyond hours. Ironman, usually the time limit's around 17 hours, but it's still a longer effort than maybe racing a 5K or a 10K on a weekend, that kind of thing. And the big difference though, that I've always found is that when I'm doing ultra marathons and focusing mostly on that, it's a lot of one system of your body, right? It's that repeated running motion. And often you'll get a race where the terrain varies. And so, you get some hiking, which I don't know, maybe that's a different sport kind of, and you can mix up the muscle systems a little bit. But for the most part, it's like, your legs and that running, the muscles involved in that just repeatedly kind of taking the toll. And with Ironman, obviously you get to switch it up. So you get to swim, you get to bike, and you get to run. And that's the big difference is like, it's a nice kind of mental shift throughout the race for you, which is enjoyable. And then just on your body, it like shifts the systems to feel like a little less taxing at times, but at the same time, it almost allows you to go harder for each of those disciplines. So it's a balance, I guess, learning to race both of them. But I think having started in ultra running and having that as my main background really has helped my longevity in Ironman racing, if nothing else.
Yeah. And for our listeners, an ultramarathon is any distance over the marathon distance of 26.2 miles. So when you've run ultramarathons, you've done what, 50 kilometers, 50 miles, 100 miles? What are the distances that you have focused on?
Yeah, I've raced everything from 50 Ks up to 100 miles. I've done 3 100-mile races. And, I really like that 100K distance, I think, is like kind of a sweet spot for me of ultra running. You get into 100 miles and there's just so many variables. So that's like, that's something I think is kind of next level to physically and mentally and emotionally and everything prepare for. But that 100K distance is still quite far, but I've never found that I have to really go into a place where it's like really digging so deep that it's like the recovery afterwards it takes a toll.
Oh, yeah, I can only imagine that. So like, your recovery on let's say one of those 100 milers, like, are you looking at like weeks or days, or, because I know like cortisol, like your stress hormone, probably is through the roof at some level for an extended period of time. And so like, what does the recovery look like for you with that?
So, I had youth on my side for a lot of when I haven't raced 100 miles per se. And, I've done the trails and the peaks and everything, but racing the 100 milers I don't think I've done one since I've been older than 30. I could be wrong, but I think maybe I was 30 for my last one. So your body is a lot different in your 20s than in your 30s, right? And so I think that absolutely helped me, whether it was naivety or just also the physical benefits of being younger. I definitely had to take time, just to lay low. But I really think that if I were to race 100 miles now when I'm 36, like it would be quite a recovery period for me. And that, I believe strongly in listening to your body. So, obviously it's going to be sore, it's going to be tired and things like that. But, when I do long efforts, I still, within like a week to 10 days, will probably try and shuffle out a 20-minute jog, right? And I mean, truly shuffling 12 to 15-minute paces, maybe a jog a minute, walk a minute type of thing for 20 minutes. But I think I've found that for the recovery, keeping that motion going is very helpful for me, just to bounce back sooner than, I might otherwise. I think when I stop moving is when I have the most problems with the recovery.
When you said you've raced 3 100 milers, I think you said 3, right?
Yes.
There were some pretty big name ones. Like you did Western States, right? And I think Comrades, and what was the other one? The Big Hurt?
It was Hurt 100, Western States, and then Old Dominion 100, which is
Old Dominion. Okay.
Yeah. And Western States was actually my first one, which again, like I had the gift of being young and happening to get like essentially a golden ticket spot back in what would that have been, 2009, I guess, maybe, when golden tickets were like totally different story than they are now. But I had no idea what I was getting into. I had no idea, I knew some of the big names I'd be racing against, like Nikki Kimball and some of that, but I wasn't in a place where I felt competitive or anything. It was just let's do that distance. And it went very poorly. I finished, which was good. But I had a really rough start, like really early, within 50K. I was not feeling very good at all, and had to figure out how to dig myself back out of that hole. And so of course, when that's the story of the day, pretty soon after, you're like, all right, I should do another one.
I have to ask a question. I was thinking of asking this later, but because you mentioned like in that Western States at the 50K mark, so you're 31 miles in and you're already in pain, and you've got another 69 miles to go.
It's awful.
Yeah, I'm wondering, do you think that that ultra athletes in general, people in this sport, have kind of a special relationship with suffering? Because I feel like people who do this stuff, like you have to know how to embrace suffering because it's just such a big part of what you do.
Yeah, I think, that there's definitely something to that. And I think that, a lot of people now, we're seeing a lot of people get into these sports, which is great. And more people are trying them. But I do think there's a big learning curve because it's hard to articulate, I guess, that level of suffering and kind of those places you really go and have to say like how bad you really feel, but you're still putting one foot in front of the other. And I think to some degree, because it is so hard to articulate, you just kind of hold it inside and hold on to it as tight as you can because you have that in you, but it is hard to kind of prep people. I coach athletes, and it's always, I'd say that's one of the toughest parts of my job, is to prep them for that side of how hard an Ironman really is if you're trying to really race it, or how hard it is to keep going on a day when you have 70 miles left and you already feel awful, right? So you kind of, for me, my family and my friends who have been my crew and my support system through all the training and things like that is a massive part of what I draw on in those times. And having them there, I'm like, oh, like everyone's out here to support me. Like, what else are we going to do all day? But, like, it's not like I have a haircut appointment I need to be done for, right? Like, I may as well just keep going. And
off this time.
Yeah. And it does. I mean, in all of my racing, there have been very few times when it doesn't get better, and so that's like a big thing that I've always held on to too. And it's helped me through.
That is one of the cool things. I'm far less experienced than you, but I've run over the marathon distance before. And that is one of the interesting things that comes up with this, is that you kind of go through waves where you feel absolutely horrible for a 5, 10, 15 mile stretch or whatever. And then all of a sudden you can start feeling good again for another 10, 15 mile stretch. And then it goes in those weird sort of waves. Is that something you notice? And you just try to like get through the low points, knowing it'll get better?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, the more you do it, the more experience you have with nutrition. That goes really hand in hand, I think, with a lot of those peaks and valleys. And just, and that doesn't mean to say you can do your nutrition in such a way to avoid it totally, but at least, step one for me, if I'm starting to hit that time of the low, is calories and fluids and electrolytes. Right. And that's just where my mind goes. That's all I need to focus on. And then a lot of times that helps pull me back out. And so, but yeah, I mean, it's crazy to think how bad you can be. And then a couple hours later, you're on top of the world and you're running again, and it is possible. And it's been fun actually this year. Like I've been watching some of the record attempts on the long trail, and it's continued to shape my perspective about how much you can be in a position where it looks like everything's lost and you can turn it around. The last 2 records that were set on the long trail this season, both of them with like 50 miles to go, I was like, I don't think they're going to get like their paces just don't add up. And they have totally changed my perspective even still of how much you can turn it around.
Yeah. Do you think that time spent, like the build up, like your base training leading up to those big events, plays a big role in that body awareness and how you feel throughout? Like I call it like check-ins. You're checking in with yourself all the time. And so do you think that the more you're in that, in the demons and the pain, you're sort of checking in more accurately with how you feel?
For sure. There's no doubt that having, even if it's not the isolated training for a specific trail or race or something, like having now been racing Ironman and ultras since 2006, I have 15 years of training in me where I've experienced so much and I know like it will get better. And then being able to do specific builds for the races where the point of the training a lot of times is not to be successful. Like sometimes my coach gives me days where she doesn't want me secretly to succeed, right? Because she wants me to hit that point where I have to make the decision. I'm going to keep going, even though I'm not hitting the numbers. I'm not making the paces. I'm not feeling great. And I have to troubleshoot, figure out what I need to do to get through it. And if you do that enough times, it becomes a habit. And you get to a race and you're like, all right, I guess this is where, this is what I trained for.
Would you say that some of the troubleshooting that you do out on these long events is kind of part of the fun of it? I mean, it's a mental challenge more than anything, I would think, especially these really, really long things. I'm excited to talk to you in a few minutes about the 46 FKT, because we're from the Adirondacks and that's like big news for us.
Oh yeah.
But what was my question that I just asked? Do you think that that's part of the fun of it, is all this, the
learning that you get to do, and it's always different. Like there's sometimes where, music will help snap me out of it. A podcast will help. And then some days I'm like, the last thing I want is that, like, give me, we got to find somewhere to go get a Coke. Like that's what's going to help, So it is, because you never know, it definitely helps with the monotony that long training can be sometimes. And I do a lot of these things, by myself, just the nature of being a professional endurance athlete. I'm out there alone a lot. So it keeps it interesting than just being like, all right, another 10 hours out there with myself.
Before we move off of just endurance sports in general, I wanted to ask you about triathlons. Were you naturally good at all 3 events? Because I've been a runner for a really long time and I've thought about doing a triathlon, but being a runner for 20 years didn't seem to make me very good at cycling. Like cycling was really hard when I got on a bike, and I'm still pretty mediocre at it. And I'm a terrible swimmer.
Yeah.
So were you just good at all 3, or was there like one that you really had to work and train yourself for to be competitive in these Ironmans?
I think the secret to my success as a triathlete has been that I'm like average to above average at all 3. But they haven't come easy. The running and the durability aspect, especially for Ironman, has kind of come naturally to me, I think. But By no means was I a fast runner. You know, I didn't run in college. I didn't play any sport in college. So I swam like on summer swim team growing up. So I did have the basics of strokes from a young age, but you know, my sister was the super swimmer. So I kind of gave that up pretty early. And then cycling, I learned that I think, you know, the end of my college career, I started riding and I hated it because I was like, these hills around Charlottesville are too hard. Like who likes this, you know? And I think that, you know, you should definitely do triathlon. It's really fun just to have that like mix up of sports and
experiences. I'm down.
Yeah. And you know, it's kind of a double-edged sword that cycling and swimming are two sports that, you know, the more you do them, and I think people kind of underestimate how much cycling and how much swimming it can take to be really, really good.
Sure.
But you can get by with just a little bit for sure. And, you know, run fitness and that kind of thing. And if you do that over time, it will, that deposit will keep adding up and you will kind of see the strength in cycling and swimming get better. And it will only honestly like help you be a runner for longer. I mean, that cross training aspect is invaluable, I think, for me.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So before, like Andy said, before we jump into the Adirondacks here, I had a question in terms of like you didn't just jump into an Ironman, right? Like you built up, you ran 5Ks, 10Ks, like what did that process, because I think people listening will want to know, like, especially if they're looking to know where to start or ideas, how did that build up happen for you?
So part of the story is that I did kind of jump into a lot of things. I spent my 2 years of undergrad at the Naval Academy. And while you're there, you do have to play a sport, whether it's varsity level or club sport. So I wasn't playing anything at the varsity level. I played club lacrosse for a season. And then I was looking for something else to do. And Navy has a marathon team. And I had a friend and he's like, come, you know, run with us. And to be on the marathon team, you have to qualify for Boston was their standard. And so I talked to the coach and he said, well, we already ran Chicago Marathon for the year. You know, that was everyone's qualification. And he's like, but there are some people running the JFK 50 mile and it's next month. And if you finish that, we'll take you on the team for next spring.
Wow.
And I mean, you know, you're at the Naval Academy, like what else? I don't know. People are doing crazy things all the time there. Right. So I went out the door that day and I ran 16 miles, which was the longest run I had run to that point. And I duped two friends into doing it with me. And so we all signed up and were able to finish the race. And I got onto the marathon team. And from then I think my running progression was at least somewhat more normal. But I will say growing up, I did a lot of 5Ks and 10Ks and even 10-mile races with my dad. He would be kind of running these, you know, local recreational races. And as soon as I was really, you know, I have like 8 and under trophies kind of, because I was like the only 8-year-old out there running these things some days, but he would bring me along and just kind of, I think that was actually like the foundation for a lot of it. So I did start, it was just pretty early, you know? And I think that's the key is like, you know, more than necessarily feeling like you need to follow a normal progression. I would say 2 things. Like the first thing is what's going to excite you enough to get you out of bed in the morning to do the training for what you're picking. Right. And then 2, are you really willing to put in the work that it takes? Like
Sure.
if you want to make the jump, there's plenty of people who, you know, sign up for an Ironman as their first triathlon. And I don't necessarily always recommend that either, but, you know, and I didn't do that either because there is a lot to learn with triathlon, but if that's what you do, you know, then just make sure that you're willing to do the work it actually takes. You know, I think there's really no like glitz and glamour to signing up for something that just has the name around it and you think is going to be great, but then suffering through everything else because it's not fun for you, you know?
Yeah. And I agree with that so much. Like, I think that a lot of people look for the glitz and glamour within their fitness practice or whatever it is they're doing for movement, right? But we always say like here that it doesn't have to be fun to be fun, right?
Yeah.
Like it's there's a process to that. And if you want to get above a beginner level in anything, it's generally not super inspiring every day, right? By any means.
No,
There's a
yeah.
process to that. And I think that, especially with media these days and YouTube and whatnot, a lot of people are seeing the end result, but they're not seeing the result of 15 or 20 years to hit mastery, right? We talk about like the 10,000 hours of practice to hit mastery. They're not seeing that. So it's refreshing to hear you say, like, you're in the trenches, time alone, working through it, putting in the work. That's huge.
Yeah. And I think, when someone looks at things I've done, I have my boyfriend, I have my dog, right? But I don't have kids. I don't have a lot of other obligations, like, and back when I was working in the corporate world and full-time and trying to chase the dream of being, a professional triathlete, like it was up at 3:30 or 4 a.m. at the gym for a couple hours before work, working 8 to 10 hours a day, back to the gym, and I was just burning the candle at both ends. And I think that's what it took. And I was totally willing to do that, deposit of time. But realistically, like if someone has a kids and family and things like that, to also balance through that kind of work, like, it's going to drive everyone insane, and relationships are just going to implode and things like that. So what you're saying with just kind of those little things that might not be super sexy every day, right? But like getting up, doing an hour of work, work in that sense, before work. And that consistency will pay off. And you're going to be happier because you're not like imploding these other things that are important to you in your life.
Yeah. And the point that you bring up, I think is really well said as far as like the transition period that you went through from corporate to professional athlete. We talk about that a lot, where you have to find the time somewhere to gain experience or expertise anywhere to get to that next level. So we have a lot of people that'll say, let's say in the business world, that they have a 9 to 5 they don't like, but want to start their own company. They say, I don't have any time. You're saying that you got up at 3:30 in the morning to train and then go work and then train again, right? I think that goes to so many areas of life in general. Like you were finding 3 to 4 hours a day, no excuses. Like you said you wanted to do this and you did it, even though it wasn't easy. There was no magic fix to that.
Yeah. And like, there's no coach that can drag you out of bed, and it's that intrinsic motivation. And it's okay if you're intrinsically motivated to do something different, right? Or to not do that. And I think that's, the best part of, and you guys see this, I'm sure, with clients, is like seeing your athletes thrive, like physically, mentally, emotionally, like family life, all of that is like so much more rewarding than seeing them be so miserable for 6 months, race an Ironman, and then never want to do anything fitness wise again,
Sure. And I think the important part of that, right, is getting very clear on the actual goal, right? So people say, and yet all their other in their daily habits aren't aligned to make that a reality. So when we dive deeper into what is your true goal, and we can really get to that, interesting answers come up, right? Like I want higher self-esteem. I want, to feel more confident in my day-to-day life, whatever. There's a lot of examples of that, but I think getting really, really clear on that goal helps people align what it is to get there.
Yeah, I joke that I coach athletes and I'm like a part-time therapist, because a lot of that is kind of digging deep and like figuring that stuff out.
Yeah, we say that all the time.
So Josh, what do you think? Can we jump into the 46 here? Because I'm excited about that. We're from the Adirondacks, and a lot of our listeners are still local. We're a smaller podcast right now, and most of our listeners know the 46 high peaks. Several of our clients at the gym have hiked a whole bunch of them. So they're going to be really excited to hear about this. We've talked about ultra marathons and triathlons so far, but you also do another event. I guess we can call it FKT events. And can you explain real quick what an FKT is?
Sure. So
the other events.
Yeah. So FKTs are called our fastest known times, and they are basically like speed records. And so you take, kind of any trail, or the classic ones, I guess, would be like the Appalachian Trail, the Pacific Crest Trail, the Continental Divide Trail, the Long Trail, that sort of thing. And throughout time, people have timed themselves. Sorry, you guys, my dog's like I don't know if you guys can see this, but she's wanting to be in the show today. So I'm,
Welcome.
yeah. I just wanted to be clear of what was going on in case people are like, I hear something rustling behind me. I do live on a farm, but like, that's the only farm animal I have in here. And so, speed, you time yourself start to finish, and there's various rules associated with different styles. So you can do an FKT unsupported, which would mean you start with what and finish basically with what you have in your pack and what's on you. The only thing you can kind of resupply along the way is water from natural sources, or like if you came across a water fountain, I think that's okay too. Then there's self-supported, which means you can get resupply along the way, but it has to be something you either had dropped off earlier in a bear canister or something for yourself, or if you have a store along your route, you can walk into the store and get something for yourself, but no help from outside sources. And then there's supported, which means kind of anyone, anything can be coming into the game to help you go on your run. And the two records that I have are both supported records. So I had a crew along with me for both of them.
And the two records you have, is that the long trail in Vermont? And then now the 46 high peaks, you're the fastest woman and second fastest time overall to complete all 46 high peaks in the Adirondacks. And you did that in how much time was it?
So it was 3 days, 16 hours and 16 minutes. So I honestly took myself a little by surprise, I think, by becoming the second fastest person. I had a really good crew and a really good plan, and it played out really, really well last year.
And for our listeners, that's all 46 high peaks in the Adirondacks. That's 160 miles you covered on foot, 67,000 feet of elevation gain, I think it was.
Wow.
Yeah, in 3.5 days, basically.
Yeah, it's that elevation gain that's the real kind of kicker, I think, for the Adirondacks. Just that constant like up and down, and then just the varied terrain, like it that's where I see a lot of people who hike in the area kind of have the most trouble.
Now you were I know you're in New Hampshire right now, but you were from Virginia, so how did you, are the 46 high peaks that famous of an FKT challenge nationwide, or how did you hear about that challenge, and how did you figure it out?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I had heard about the high peaks like back when FKTs, now there's a whole website like that's really modern and everything, but FKTs used to be on like a pro boards thing, which was very old school, and like a message board you would go on and see if anyone's kind of done something in a while. And I got like enamored. I think I saw kind of someone had done the 46 peaks at one of my friends' houses, and I had seen kind of their thing on the wall, and they had told me about it. And I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting, and looked it up and had just been following the pro boards on it for a while. And so I knew about Jan Welford and kind of his record, and had always followed and seen if anyone else, was going after it and that sort of thing. So I think it was just kind of a random thing that let me know it existed. And then as I was getting into triathlons, I was making frequent trips to Lake Placid area for training camps and racing and things like that. So, I knew the area, and I knew I loved the area. And so that kind of helped. And then in terms of like actually getting to see a lot of it, I had to take some trips up there. And I spent probably close to a month, maybe a little bit more actually, through especially in the last year leading up to the record attempt, when I knew I was going for it, I made probably like 4 or 5 specific trips up there for the purpose of scouting and route planning and things like that.
Okay, I was wondering about that because I can't imagine what the logistics require as far as like planning out the route and stuff. I was wondering if you'd come out and gotten familiar with the trails, and especially like some of the bushwhacks and stuff. I imagine you were off trail for a lot of this, right?
Yeah, and so my parents were like a huge help. They helped a lot in Vermont too. They'll come up with me and take care of my dog Ramona while I'm out on the trail for a long day, and then they pick me up and drop me off where I need to be, because a lot of the scouting works best if you can do the point to point. And then they feed me and let me do it again the next day, so you can kind of be somewhere for 10 days to 2 weeks and see quite a lot of miles if you're really focused to do it that way. And then The bushwhacks and stuff. Yeah. So I did the long trail in 2018. And when I did the long trail, I had quite a bit of experience on trails, but I had never even thought of going off trail before. Like that was a foreign concept to me. But I had known that for the 46, like there's a little bit of off trail travel. And I'm a fan of like the Barkley marathons. And so I know that's a thing people were doing. So in my recovery from the long trail, I was like, you know what, I'm going to learn how to navigate off trail. And I joined the Quantico Orienteering Club down outside of DC. And I started going to some of their events and doing just the weekend, like orienteering meets and things like that, and learning to do some of that bushwhacking and navigating and things like that. So that, come 2 years later, when I was planning for the Adirondacks, I was at least baseline comfortable doing some of that stuff. And then, there was only one I actually went out and kind of scouted a bushwhack on my own, was when I was looking at the one from Dial to or from Dix up to Dial. So I did scout that alone, and I get nervous just going off trail by myself. I prefer to always have someone, and Jan Welford was a great resource. He helped me scout one, and then I had a couple other friends who came up for a day or two and would join me as we'd scout the others. And that was probably one of the hardest things for the Adirondacks, was just getting comfortable and making kind of my route plan with that in mind. So I wasn't doing those in the dark and things like that.
Did you create your own route, or did you follow the same route as a previous record holder? Jan's route or something?
Yeah, my route was a little bit different than Jan's or Ryan's. That those were the two I had probably the most information on to go on. And I think with route planning, I had a lot of other ideas. Like I wanted to do 2 other bushwhacks, and I thought that, there's a course out there for sure that's shorter than what I did. But once I did some of those, my boyfriend and I were like, we're never doing this again. Like, yeah, like this is off the table. So, there's a lot of gnarly stuff out there. And, I really had to take into account when in the record I would be hitting, hitting something on day 1 is a lot different than going at it on day 3. And just thinking of like, crew manpower, like crewing is just as, if not more tiring at sometimes than actually running. And so having to be like, someone else has to be strong enough to go with me and carry everything through something like that. I had to pick and choose when I was doing that.
Can you tell our listeners a little bit, like, what does each day look like? Because I'm picturing, the way that I picture you doing this is you get dropped off at the trailhead and you start doing a section of the hike or whatever. And then you find your way eventually to some other trailhead where a car or a van picks you up. And then maybe you catch a little bit of sleep in the van and they drive you to another trailhead, and then you get out and do it again. Is that basically how this works?
Pretty much. Yeah. I think, I had done enough scouting that I was able to make time estimates of like pacing for myself. And say, okay, I'm going to start in the Sewards, and I think that'll take me, I forget exactly, but 7 or 8 hours, to get through that section. So the van drops, myself and my friend Courtney as my pacer off at 4 a.m. and then it better be back at 10 a.m., be a little early, and then hopefully we're out of the woods at this time. But yeah, if you have good planning and have a good crew, we literally finished up that section. We're running out of the trailhead, and ran directly into the back of the van, like dove in the van, and they were driving. I'm changing in the car as it's moving, and then, so by the time I get to the next trailhead, I'm ready to go, maybe caught a 5-minute nap, but I've eaten a bunch and put my feet up a little bit. And then, yeah, they get there, they're like, you're here. They open the door and I'm off to the next one. And so, and then at the end of the day, so like my first day I did the Sewards and then the McIntyre Range, Marshall, and then I connected over to Allen. So, and I did Allen. And then after Allen, I at least knew like I was getting kind of a 3 to 4 hour break where I was going to have more of a meal, put my feet up, try and get a couple hours of sleep, that sort of thing, before van door opened at 2:30 in the morning and we were off again.
How much sleep do you get? How many times did you sleep and for how long?
So I found that I do okay with like a 4-hour rest period and then just maximizing the sleep that I can. in that. So ideally it's like less than 30 minutes to change, eat a meal, and get myself into a bed. And then same on the other side. Like once I've changed, really, it's like I can eat breakfast on the go. I'm just, opening the van door, literally starting to walk, and my body warms up. I start eating as I go. And then at least I'm making time and moving. So, sleep during that doesn't come easy. The second night we slept in a campsite at Gilbrook, and, sleeping on the ground when your body's going through all that is tough. So, but like, you just, I practice it at home sometimes, like just trying to force myself to like learn how to fall asleep, and I learned to like focus my mind. I just try and count and then hope I fall asleep. And, so in the end, I think those, if you're going for more than 48 hours, I think it's pretty important to make sure you're getting enough sleep, which, I'd say is 3 to 4 hours to get through that.
Now, you've shouted out your crew a couple times. Can you like talk to us about how important a crew is and what they do for you? How many people did you have in your crew?
I had, I think, about 8 joining me in the Adirondacks. Yeah. And so, especially in the Adirondacks where there's, in the Long Trail too, there's no cell service, right? Like people have to be able to follow a plan and, trust themselves out on trails and things like that, and be comfortable being self-sufficient in that sense. And so, they were doing everything for me from cooking, getting me clean socks and shoes out there, carrying, I was always carrying the minimal amount I ever needed to, which was usually like 1 flask of liquid. And they would carry everything else, which sometimes for, I think our longest segment we went without resupply was close to 30 miles. So, it's heavy because they have to carry my stuff and their stuff, and then, just be on top of like the reminders for me about eating and drinking, and, making sure we're not, it's pretty easy to convince yourself you need to sit down and take a little bit more of a rest than you do. So keeping you moving and positive in that sense, it's a really big job. I had for that to make that campsite at Gilbrook. One of my crew members, Kate, she had to hike in and out that 5 miles, like 3 times at least, to get everything that we needed in. So that everyone could, sleep who was going to be there. And then same thing on the other side, like had to hike it all out the next day, so there's, I think even there's probably so much I don't even know about that they do to make sure it was successful.
Did you have any, so like there's a lot of planning, years it sounds like, of, looking into this and you're building your team and whatnot. Did you have something that went wrong during this attempt?
Nothing major. I will say that. We were super lucky there, the weather in the Adirondacks, we had storms in that first day. And the second day too, there were some storms, and, I was heading up the McIntyre range, and everyone was hiking out. It was only midday and there was a lot of people hiking out, and they're like, the rangers are turning people around. There's thunderstorms coming. And I was like, because going into right now Algonquin, those are 2 places you don't want to be in a thunderstorm, and so I just had to be like, all right, like I'll get to tree line and then we'll assess, and luckily it was still blue skies and we felt okay to still go. The storms came a few hours later, but something like that could have, probably a few near misses with weather in that sense, but in a couple of the drives, I think going from Street and Nye over to Whiteface, there was like some traffic, and the guys stop, like holding the little sign telling us to stop, and everyone's like, oh no. But nothing, again, it was like, feels like 2 hours and it's 30 seconds probably in that sort of an instance. But again, you could have a car breakdown or something like that. And luckily we didn't have any big issues.
It's funny you mentioned the traffic, because I was actually thinking that for your crew, like the parking up there and the traffic can be quite a thing to deal with sometimes. Is that something they had to be concerned about?
Yeah. So actually for Street and Nye, I think that was probably the toughest parking situation. A lot of it is good because for the most part, a lot of what happens is kind of like at weird hours. So you're able to miss like the major influx of people. But with Street and Nye, I was doing that. I think I started around like 8 a.m. So I was coming out and, parking was full, and they hadn't gotten a parking spot up at the lodge. they were parked 2 miles away at South Meadow Road and so, we had estimated my timing, but there's no service. Like you have service at the top of street and but not once you come down. And so we came down quite a bit faster than expected. And luckily I had seen that we were moving better than I thought we were. And I had 2 friends with me. And so I sent one ahead and I said, hey, can you run ahead and just let them know we're coming, because I can't get a text through. So he did that. And luckily he did, because my boyfriend had to like sprint down the 2 miles. Like, I think he grabbed like a friend's mountain bike. He was just racing down the road, went and got the van, was coming up and it was all fine because they had at least food there for me and a new pair of shoes. Like, it was going to take me time to do all that anyway. But it was funny. Like, just the parking was full. So we were out of luck.
That's so fun.
Yeah, that's something that you wouldn't, like, I would never think about that, right? Like, you're thinking more of like, being in good enough shape for it and food and all of the recovery, but like parking. Like,
well, it is a hot topic in the Adirondacks, so I knew I had to make some contingency plans at times for that.
Sure. So this is a long event, nutrition wise, we're big on nutrition here. Not so much race nutrition, like where your world is, but like, what does that look like? Are you eating like whole foods? Are you getting real meals, or is it a lot of like gels and bars? What's that look like?
So when I'm doing like a multi-day type of thing, I try and do a mix of stuff. I think the biggest thing is like to get calories any way you can. So if for someone that's going to be mostly, gels and stuff, I think you just go with it and hope your stomach holds and things, I'm lucky. I feel like my stomach, is like an iron stomach, and I can make it through without too many gut issues, which helps a lot. So I do have a couple products that I use without fail. And one is it's made from F2C Nutrition, and it's called Endurance 5-to-1. And it's like a powder. So it becomes liquid nutrition, and it's, a ratio of 5-to-1 with carbs to protein. And I find that when I'm doing a multi-day kind of almost hiking type of effort like that, it's just enough protein to keep me full, keep me like satisfied, but a lot of carbs for that energy. And it's like a jet fuel for me. Like, it just sits really well and I can keep going. And then I balance that with my noon electrolytes. And so I make sure I'm getting in like enough sodium through the noon that I'm having. So that is like really the bulk. Like when I'm moving, that's the bulk of where a lot of my calories are coming from. And then on top of that, I do spring nutrition gels. So their gels are a little bit more like real food based. And honestly, I started using them because it was like more bang for your buck. You can get gels with like 250 calories. And I'm like, weight savings, right? Like I can carry that instead of 3 of the other ones. So, but I do think they work quite well. And then, I mean, I'll pack like in the bag that the crew would have. It's, kind of a free for all after that. Like, will I want gummy bears? Will I want Slim Jims? Will I want, like we will have literally a wide range of foods, most of what I wouldn't eat in a normal day-to-day setting. But like, when we're grasping for straws, anything goes. And then, when I stop for like a longer meal or right before I sleep or something like that, I would, I do quesadillas a lot. My friend that I mentioned earlier, Kate, she's from New Zealand, and she makes these pies that are like meat pies that are so good. And that hits the spot usually. So, I've done SpaghettiOs and things like I definitely need to just replenish the calories, and however I can do that, when I'm out there for the record, I'll just do whatever it takes in that sense.
It's so funny, that answer, because I've always found it so interesting that in the ultra endurance world, when it comes to nutrition, a lot of these athletes are consuming junk food. Like you mentioned, the way that you eat when you're out on one of these events is not how you would eat during a normal day. So you hear all the time, like, I've listened to interviews with like Courtney DeWalter or whatever, and she's talking about how she's eating jelly beans and nachos, out there on the run. But I know that you're super focused on health. You probably have like a really clean diet generally, and a lot of whole foods and organic and all this and that. But it's really funny that out on these races, I guess it's just so important to take in calories, and you just go with whatever your body craves. I mean, I know me, I eat very clean my whole life, but when when I go out for a long run, which for me might only be 15 miles or something, I get back and I just want to have like a bag of potato chips or something.
Yeah. And
that happens.
Yeah. And I think that, I don't have a lot of background or knowledge into the science behind diet at all. I just kind of know what I've done now for the last 15 years with sports and what works. And my diet definitely was not clean and like good to start. In the beginning days, it was like, I remember having like Taco Bell and Chick-fil-A a lot for like my work lunches and things like that, which I still, might hit Taco Bell from time to time if I like really need to. But for the most part now I have changed a lot and just learned that I feel better when I eat a little bit cleaner. I'm making more of my meals and things like that. Some of that has gone with just having time to do that now, which I think is good. But I think, again, I don't know the science, but it's like when you're just moving nonstop, I just have to believe that it's like those quick burning processed sugars are like, they just hit the mark. And if you can keep your tank full of that, then, it gives you the energy. I think, overthinking it is pretty easy to do, but if you keep it simple and kind of try and just listen to what your body wants and don't judge yourself for wanting Pop-Tarts or wanting a Slim Jim or something, right? Like who cares? So, I think that's a big part of it too.
My guess is that, gut issues are such an issue out there on these long runs. People get upset stomachs and they get nauseous and things like that. Digestibility is probably a big deal. So it's like whatever your body says it wants, if jelly beans are what you can just absorb immediately and they're not going to upset your stomach. That's what
jelly beans. Yeah.
Nice. So your nutrition from like an Ironman to the Adirondack attempt there, totally different, right?
Yeah, in Ironman, I still like prefer liquid nutrition for that as well. I think it's just, again, I don't know if it just helps keep me more hydrated or whatever, but I just prefer the simplicity of that too, to be honest. But when I'm racing Ironman, I don't do much protein. So I kind of bank on the fact that I'm not going to get starving. Although when you like bike by a barbecue or something, you're like, I could go for a burger or something right now. But generally I can get through that day with just kind of like a carb mix type of thing. And then the noon for electrolytes. And, it's been like a process of trial and error. And there have been days when I felt way better and just kind of been like, okay, what did I do nutrition wise to figure that out? But with an Ironman being done in around 10 hours, you can kind of get away with a little bit less, but my effort level is higher. So I do have to pay attention a little bit more to that digestibility factor and what's really like going to sit okay.
With the Adirondack event there, what percentage of it was running, jogging, walking, like what? Because like I hike, I'm not a runner. I do love open water swimming, but I'm just imagining like running up some of these mountains and then doing that for 3+ days in a row. Like what percentage are you walking compared to running versus like a shuffle? Like what's that look like?
It's an overwhelming in the Adirondacks percentage of hiking versus running. I mean, the sections I can say offhand, I know I was running were heading into Seymour, right? You get that nice flatter stretch of decent trail going in for the Sewards, and then coming down, out of the Sewards, like on the Calkins Brook Trail, I think it is, you can, once you get to a certain point, you can start to run a little bit more. And then when I connected over to Allen, I could run a bit of that until it gets to the steep part of Allen, and then coming back out. And other than that, I mean, the sections where I was really running were probably few and far between, like maybe in that AMR section when I was crossing over to go up to the Great Range on the road. So that was probably like a mile, but if I was going to add up the run mileage of that, it was, so negligible, I feel like, in the grand scheme of that. And so that was a big part of the training, was becoming a fast hiker. And I think that, again, triathlon has helped me because it's made my whole body strong. The swimming has just helped my core and my upper body so much. I'm a big fan of using trekking poles at times, and like those are just so helpful in the Adirondacks. Not everywhere, because a lot of times you just want to use your hands, but in a lot of places, being able to use the poles, especially just in training, to really like fine tune that slow, quote slow, but fast fast pace, and just making it so I could do that for like 20 hours a day for 3 days straight. So
So it sounds like the strategy is kind of you hike probably up most of the mountains and on any of the technical terrain, try to make as good a time as you can without destroying yourself, and then just catch whatever running you can on like the easy stuff, on the flat stuff, or on like the moderate downhill.
Yep. And I mean, sometimes it's like 10 steps, but if you
Yeah.
can run for 10 steps, it does add up for sure, and if you think about that, like, it's just, I think my brain just is like, how can I move through this the most efficient way I can? And so, but a lot of it is like using full body and using my hands for both ascending and descending, I think has really helped. I think a lot of people, especially the downhills, you need good shoes where you feel comfortable. But then the more you can kind of stay low, like for me, staying low is key, because then I feel like if I fall, I'm not going to just like tumble down the mountain. Right.
Yeah.
So I want to stay low. So if I fall, I just kind of fall over. And then, but being like nimble and flexible in that sense was something I had to learn and kind of use a strength program to gain.
That's actually a good transition, because I wanted to ask you a little bit about your supplemental training, like if you did strength or mobility work, and how you find that supports your goals on these endurance events. Like what do you focus on with the strength work or mobility work or whatever else you do?
So since I've started doing these kind of multi-day, more trail strength oriented things, I have worked in a lot more strength work. When I was mostly doing triathlon and stuff, I could get away with like TRX and some just basic functional strength, keeping my core quite strong and things like that. But I was getting a lot of what I needed through swimming and things like that. But being able to build the strength for something that long was going to require some focused effort. So I've worked like, I had a strength coach in Virginia, and then now I use an online strength coach, and and it's very basic. It's like, I think a lot of people would call it like boring, but I like the strength work. I think it's fun, and it's quick. It's like 30 to 45 minutes, 2 times a week. And then I kind of have a mobility routine. I can, if I'm feeling, like an overachiever, I'll do that every day, maybe during the week, but just making sure like I'm staying flexible, like, T-spine mobility and things like that, neck mobility, and just moving those in very, very basic ways a little bit every day has really helped. And then, for training, I do a lot of weight vest, like hiking. So when I was, training for the Adirondacks and I was mostly in Virginia, I would head to Shenandoah National Park, and there's like a steep climb, and I would literally just hike up the steep climb, hike down the steep climb, hike up, up and down, with a 20 to 30 pound weight vest on. And I would do that honestly for like a really long time sometimes, but like, for 3 to 4 hours, I could be doing a like quarter-mile section of trail up and down with that weight vest. And, everyone else coming to hike that day is like, what are you doing? But you get that kind of a lot of bang for your buck with that, because you're not doing a ton of pounding, but you are getting some excess pounding on your legs, especially for that descending. And then that helps because, day 2 or day 3 of my record attempt, my legs aren't totally shot yet. And again, I think it's lower heart rate. It just kind of helps balance some of the training, and it doesn't take too much out of me, but I'm getting some gains out of it.
I really appreciate that you said that your strength training is very simple. And you said that most people would find it boring, because we talk about that a lot, how the most effective training usually is very simple and very boring. And sometimes with clients, that's something we need to teach people, because everyone's looking for like the shiny new thing, and they want to be entertained with their workouts. They want it to be fun and jump from one exercise to another. But like you said, effective training for you is very simple, very basic, just these few things that work. What are some of the things that you're targeting with your strength training that you do twice a week?
Well, most recently this year, since I haven't had a big goal, my targeting has been learning to do pull-ups.
Oh, okay.
So I'm like on a different realm right now.
I guess so.
With that goal. Yeah, I still like cannot do a pull-up to save my life. But usually it's like about just activating glutes, hamstrings, like making so much of triathlon, I think, that I was doing was so quad dominant
Okay.
that when I was out on the trails, you know, I didn't know how to activate my glutes. I didn't know how to kind of get into that, like, posterior chain, I guess, to help and to like really be like the basis, which it should be, because those muscles are like super strong, right? So, you know, a lot of just like simple banded exercises for hips and glutes and stuff like that. And then, you know, like kettlebell swings and things like that. Various exercises for hamstrings, I think have really helped me.
That's
Do you have two exercises? Two exercises and two stretches like that are like your go-to that you've seen great results from and you keep hitting frequently?
I think what is it, like the crow's stretch or something, or the pigeon stretch, where you can do that standing and kind of put your leg up on the table and do it, or you can do it laying down, almost like a lunge, but a little different. I think that one is, and you know, a go-to of mine. And I will say I had to learn to do all of my stretching, that one included, longer. And that's really helped. You know, I used to be somewhere like I get in the stretch and be like, okay, 10 seconds, good. Right. Next stretch. And now I try and like challenge myself to hold it for 2 minutes if I can, you know? And so that has been a big one for me. And then I think the other one I do a lot, and this is nice because I'll just be relaxing at the end of the day and lay on the floor and do this, is, you know, I lay back with my knees kind of bent, and then I just tip my knees from side to side. And I don't know if that has a name or not, but you know, my goal is to kind of have my stretching so my knees can actually touch the ground when I'm doing that. And if I'm super tight, like they barely go down. And then, you know, as I lay into it and let that go, you know, they'll get closer and closer to the ground. But that's usually my barometer of like, okay, you need to spend some more on the stretching side of things. And again, I think as I've gotten older, I've realized the benefits of that, and how much it does really help. I mean, even simple like ankle exercises and stuff, like, you know, you can spend 30 seconds a day writing the alphabet with your ankles and you'll see improvement.
Sure.
What about any sort of like recovery modalities? Do you do anything like cryotherapy or saunas, massage, chiropractic, red light therapy? I mean, are you into any of that kind of stuff?
I'm a big fan of massage. If you have someone who kind of works with athletes and can really help you target like what needs to kind of be loosened up, you know, I mean, I love massages for relaxation and stuff too, but in Virginia, I had a great massage therapist and I would see her almost weekly. And honestly, you know, 9 times out of 10, she was just doing lower body stuff and like releasing the tightness in glutes and hamstrings and quads and that whole chain. So I do think that that's super important, especially if you are cycling or as a triathlete, like we're just in that time trial position a lot and it just, everything really tightens up. So I really do. I'm a big fan of that, but I will say, you know, since I moved to New Hampshire, I haven't had, you know, a chance to find a new massage therapist yet, but I've relied on that stretching and stretching for longer than I ever want to. And then I use a Hypervolt, which is so like one of those percussive massaging devices.
Oh yeah.
And I find that, yeah. And so I have those. I have the Normatex, the recovery boots and things like that I'll use.
I like those, the Normatex.
I like them. I mean, I haven't decided if the biggest benefit for me with them is that they trap me in my seat, right? And so like I can't get up and do more, you know, so it literally just keeps you off your feet for a portion of time and it feels good, right? So that's a good thing. But I also like taking baths, like so just Epsom salt baths and things like that, I think is good. Unfortunately, with COVID, a lot of the hot tubs and saunas haven't been open, but you know, the sauna I play with carefully just because I think you have to have someone help you with the protocol to make sure you don't drain yourself with that. But there's definitely a time and a place for that too.
How many hours a week? I'm sure this is cyclical for you, but like with strength training, mobility, your endurance work, you're a professional athlete. So like how many hours a week are invested into that?
Usually close to 30 hours. Like, and if I mean, with Ironman, it wouldn't get above 30 too often at all, unless I decided to do a crazy bike adventure or something like that. With trail stuff, it can kind of creep up higher. If, you know, like when I was in the Adirondacks for 2 weeks scouting trails and I was just doing 8 to 10 hour days out there, hiking around and looking at trails. Obviously that week had a lot of hours and things like that, but I usually 20 to 30 in like the peak times. And then that said, like, you know, off season times, it's 10 and or less, you know. I'm definitely a proponent of that cyclical fashion and making sure you're giving yourself time off and your body time off and things like that.
Now, and we're approaching kind of the hour point here, and I know we want to be respectful of your time, so we'll start to probably wrap this up a little bit. But I think Josh had a few fun questions for you at the end. I wanted to know, like, who inspires you, just as far as like other ultra athletes or athletes from other sports or other people in general.
My coach Hilary Biscay has been like the number one point of inspiration for me from really getting into endurance sports. She's done she's done 66 Ironmans. She's done a lot of ultramarathons. She's like Ultraman world champion. So that's a 3-day like ultra triathlon event. And she's someone who just has showed me that like that aspect of picking something that's going to get you out of bed in the morning, you know, like if you have that dialed in, then the rest will fall into place. And it doesn't matter, you know, how big the goal is and things like that. I called her after I saw the long trail for the first time and I was like, I don't know if I can do this. And she's like, who cares? You know, like, do you want to do it? We're doing it, you know, like,
awesome.
Get the record or not, you know, that's the biggest thing. Or that's not the biggest thing. It's that you want to do it and you're going to enjoy the process of getting there. And she's also just a great human and has really shown me how to foster the relationships with my athletes to make them succeed as well. So she's always my number one source. But with the Olympics, it's like, where to even begin, right? Like Molly Seidel comes to mind with that bronze medal in the Olympics. Simone Biles has done so much. I mean, gosh, there's so many people. And I'll plug my own podcast. So I'm a co-host of the Iron Women podcast. And it's really fun because I think through that, I'm talking to my peers, I'm talking to other female professional triathletes, but then we found that, you know, a lot of times my co-host Haley and I, we have the best time and find the most inspiration talking to people outside of our sports. So we've gotten to talk to a lot of people who do endurance sports and things like that. And there's endless inspiration for me when I talk to those women.
Awesome. Very cool.
That's really cool. So I just have a few random questions here. So 1 to 3 books that have had a big influence on your life. We just talked about mentors and that, but books, you know, we're a big fan of education and constant, you know, learning. So what books have had an influence with you?
I think Jennifer Farr Davis's book, The Pursuit of Endurance, I think has been a really, you know, that's a recent book actually. And I think that she did a really great job of explaining FKTs and fastest known times and giving a little bit of an anthology in the background there. And what goes into the work for a lot of that. So I definitely appreciated her work pulling a lot of those stories together. And I find that I go back to that from time to time still as I'm, you know, pondering my next thing or things like that. And then let's see, other books. I read a lot of nonfiction because I like to just kind of let my mind go.
That's important.
Yeah. And
what are some of your favorites?
You know, gosh, I'm reading now. What am I reading now? It's like Such a Fun Age. It's one of Reese Witherspoon's book club books. So that's what I'm reading now. I just read Why We Swim, which is kind of like, I think it's nonfiction, I guess you would classify it as, but it's by Bonnie Sue. And she wrote kind of about like the art of swimming and why people swim. And that was a really good one. So those, I would definitely recommend that too. And then, you know, I'm a fan of like the classic run book, like Once a Runner, I think is a great one. But I think a lot of times I read it and I love it. And then it like goes on my shelf. And then 2 years later, I'm like, oh yeah, what's this one about? You know, and I'll pull it back out and kind of refresh my memory. But I would say those are the ones that come to mind first.
Very cool. Okay. How about a cheat meal? You're gonna go for it. What's a cheat meal look like for you? Calories don't matter, quality doesn't matter. What do you go for?
That's a good question. Probably honestly, like head to a brewery or something and have a good IPA with like a burger, sweet potato fries, you know, that kind of thing. I think that is like the most satisfying, because I think of that kind of thing like after a day when you're on the trails or on the bike or something like that, and that would probably hit the spot. And I love ice cream too, so we would have to, yeah.
Nice. I'm with you on the burger and the sweet potato fries there. That's that probably would have been my answer too.
Yeah.
That's good. Okay, next one. Cool question here. So if you could have a road sign anywhere, what would it say and why?
Oh. You know, I think one of those road signs that's, you know, actually they're in Lake Placid. It says like caution, athletes in training, right? I think that is this kind of what you were going for with that, but you know, I think just awareness around people being on the roads, cyclists, runners, and things like that. You know, I've seen just too many lives lost in the endurance sports community because of carelessness. And so the more we can just kind of be aware, I've always said, I wish before you got your license, you had to spend a day like cycling on the roads before you could drive on the roads. Because it's a totally different story when you're on a 30-pound bike versus a whatever ton car, you know? And I've unfortunately seen a lot of people get out of sport because it is pretty dangerous at times. And so I think, yeah, like anything that could catch, it would, whatever it is, it would have like a lot of lights and a lot of flashing to like get people's attention, make them look up from their phone if they had it in their hand or something like that.
Yeah, that's a great answer. That's awesome. Yeah, and I agree with that for sure. I've done some biking, you know, road running and stuff, and yeah, that is scary for sure.
Yeah.
Definitely a concern up there in the Lake Placid area too. I mean, there's a lot of people out there on bikes and on their feet, and there's a lot of traffic up there and not too many roads.
Yeah.
Okay, so do you have a favorite failure of yours? Because we know that we learn from failing, right? We fail all the time on different things, and generally, hopefully, we learn from it. Do you have something that sticks out as a favorite?
I think, you know, so I mentioned earlier, I went to the Naval Academy for 2 years. And I didn't necessarily, like, I didn't fail out. I didn't get kicked out or anything, but I didn't complete my time there. And so, you know, I've never looked at that as a failure, but I think a lot of people definitely would, in the sense of I didn't finish what I started there. But I think that's probably my favorite one, because it taught me that it's okay to like choose your own path and to make a decision that's going to be best for you, regardless of what the world might say. Right. So, you know, it was hard. Like, I know there's so many people out there who would love spots to the academies. I was one of them. I actually went to prep school for a year before I got to go to the Naval Academy. So like, I really wanted to go. And, you know, I got there, it wasn't for me. It wasn't going to be what was going to make me thrive and make me happy as a 20 and 30-year-old. Like, I could just see that. And so I made the very difficult decision to transfer to the University of Virginia, which ended up being a great place for me. And, you know, I think that above all else, it really just showed me that, like, some decisions are hard, but you can do it, you know, and you can, if you have, you know, I was really lucky to have a family that supported me through that and things like that, which, you know, hold those people close who are going to support you through those tough decisions.
And giving yourself permission for change, right? Because I think that so many of us are locked into routine, or what we think is the status quo, or we need to be or should be doing this, versus like what you said, sort of asking yourself, is this making me happy as a 20 or 30-year-old, you know?
And the same thing, like we touched on earlier, with people signing up for an Ironman because they think they want to get into triathlon, so they need to do the Ironman, right? And it's like, no, like, it's okay. Even if you've signed up, even if you've paid the $1,000 it is now, or whatever it is to go, like, it's okay to throw that to the wind and say, that's not going to make me happy, you know? I think once you learn, to do that, and to, like, you have an experience like that, it's empowering for other things in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's great. Andy, did you have something there?
Oh, well, actually, my last question was just, I was curious about your future goals. I'm interested in if you're, like, what are you more interested in pursuing? Ironmans, ultras, future FKTs? You know, what's your next plan? What's your next big event? What would you like to do in the future? Yeah,
I think that, you know, I'm not quite done with Ironman yet. I have, I think, a little, unfortunately, much to my own dismay, I think, you know, I do have a little bit of like fast racing in me that I want to see what I can do at that distance. And so I'll probably let that play out in the next couple of years or so. But I mean, I love being on trails. I love being in mountains and stuff like that. So you know, with my recent move to New Hampshire, I'm definitely starting to eye the 4,000 foot peaks in New Hampshire and kind of, you know, let that, and that's a lot of what I do sometimes is I think maybe from like what we talked about with making those decisions, you know, I'm not going to say I'm going to do the New Hampshire 48, because if I get out there and start hiking some of these and I'm like, ugh, I actually am not enjoying myself in these mountains. Like I'm not going to put myself through the process of trying to go for it. But I'm open to it right now. And I think that would be like a recent goal for me in the short term here to maybe see what kind of time I could do there. But I've only, let's see, I've hiked 3 of them so far. So I have a lot of scouting left ahead of me and time on the trail to see how that goes.
I love this theme of just following what you love to do. I mean, that's something I'm really picking here, or, you know, getting from this is you really follow what intrinsically motivates you. And that's what really keeps you going, as opposed to like saying, oh, this record exists, I should probably go for that or whatever. You know, you're keeping a lot of things on the table and you're going to go with what inspires you. I think that's really important.
Thanks. Yeah. And I mean, it's a learned, you know, something I do tell people is that is like a learned skill, you know, like a lot of what we've talked about in what it takes like to do these things is a learned skill, you know, getting up early, I even say is like a skill that you can learn, right? It wasn't innate in me. Like I didn't pop out of bed at 3:30 or 4 every morning and be ready to go. But the fact that these things are kind of skills, I think is the best part, because it means you can work on it and you can get better at it. It's not like, oh, you don't have it, you're done, you know? And so that means like anyone listening, anyone watching can think of something, right? And, you know, sit down with your notebook and brainstorm, like, what are things I can do to, you know, get better at that and to be better at making decisions of doing things I want to do versus not, you know? And it sounds silly, but if you spend time on that self-reflection, I think it pours over into a lot of other areas and it'll help you all around.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that answer. Yeah. So 2 questions here to conclude. If you were giving advice to a beginner that, say they listen to this podcast, they're inspired and they really want to jump into the endurance sports world, what would you tell a beginner that wants to get involved with that?
You know, I would say to focus on like consistency aspect before any great like physical aspect, you know, find a group that is going to get you running, biking, swimming, doing whatever week after week, right? The consistency to doing these types of goals is like the key, right? It's never one workout, it's never anything. So and if you don't have a group nearby, I realize a lot of people live in areas where that's not feasible, you know, set a goal for yourself of like a mile a day. Can I walk or run, get outside for a mile a day and see how long you can do that, right? And like, see if you want to do 2 miles a day after that or something, you know, or sometimes maybe you want to do 3, but sometimes only 1, you know. If you learn to like the consistency, you'll go really far. And I think that's like what a beginner, if a beginner builds everything based on that, fitness is fitness and fitness will come, but you have to be consistent with it.
Yeah, I love that answer. You know, I always say, you know, showing up is a win.
Oh yeah.
Like, because that is such a theme we talk about so much with people that want to get from, you know, A to B. Just the process of showing up, whether it's a good workout, a great workout, a record or not, or you didn't enjoy it or you did, just the process of being there, it immersed in that activity and habit day after day. Like you said, fitness comes, right? But it's the whole process of being there and winning in 2 days a week or 1 day a week, right? Like you're probably not going to get from A to B, but if you're there in the trenches, you know, 5 or 6 days a week somehow, and it doesn't, let's say for a beginner, it doesn't have to be training, but eating healthy, right? Going to bed, recovering, you know, being involved and consistent. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. And I think going along with that for beginners too, is the understanding that you know, with that consistency comes failure, in the sense of you're going to show up and you're going to do your part some days and show up, and you're not going to go home with a success story from the gym. You're not going to have a best time. You're not going to, you know, because the odds are against you now. Like when you're working out 5 or 6 days a week or doing something,
Yep.
you're not going to be successful 5 or
Yep.
6, you know, we all fail when we do that more than we succeed probably in workouts. And so understanding that, like, yeah, you can't set your sights on having that best workout every time. In just understanding that the top athletes in the world are failing on a daily basis at their own like workouts as part of the process. And enjoying that, you know, and being like, well, whatever, I had fun anyway, and I still can't do a pull-up today, so I guess I'll try again tomorrow. You know, I mean, that's what I'm saying every day here. So
Sure. That's I love the fact that you're pursuing new things, right? And outside of the realm of like what you're really good at.
Well,
like
the crazy thing is that, to give you the real base backstory, I was like, okay, I'm going to do this like push-up challenge because I had kind of a month laying low. And so the pull-up challenge. So the pull-up challenge began with like 4 by 30 seconds just hanging from the bar. And I couldn't do that. So I still can't even begin my 30-day challenge because I'm still working on like my grip strength, you know, to even get. And that's part of it too, is like realizing, you know, like, I mean, I hiked the high peaks in 3.5 days and I can't hang from the pull-up bar for 30 seconds. Right. So like, I'm not superhuman, you know, no one out there is. There's always going to be something to be better at. And just keeping that in mind, I think is so important if someone's starting out.
What a great mentality and message.
Yeah,
That's
what
perfect.
a great answer. Yeah. Okay, so finally, how can listeners learn more about your coaching services and or becoming a sponsor? You know, maybe someone listening would really like to work with you in some capacity. How can they learn more?
Yeah, so my website is just my name, alyssagodesky.com. And then I'm also on Instagram. Easy to find, and shoot me a message, just email, all of that stuff. I'm pretty readily available and found on the internet, I think. So yeah, I love hearing from people and hearing their stories too. So definitely reach out.
Yeah. And how about, do you want to shout out some of your sponsors or your podcast? I mean, certainly I'd like people to know what your podcast is if they want to give it a listen, hear more about this.
Yeah. So Iron Women podcast, we come out every Thursday. So it's a weekly podcast. And you can download that on wherever you get all of your podcasts. And, you know, my 2 main sponsors through the years have been Smash Fest Queen. They do triathlon and running apparel, and then Noon Hydration, which is that electrolytes I was talking about all the time. And those 2 companies have been like just huge. And without them, I don't think I could have continued kind of living this lifestyle. And I, you know, so appreciative to them.
I love Noon. I find myself chewing on the tablets sometimes. They taste so good.
I do that sometimes when for like sleep deprivation. If I'm starting to fall asleep, I'll chew on a tab instead of like drinking it, because it gives you like a jolt for at least a few minutes, right?
Yeah, totally.
Awesome. This is a lot of fun, Alyssa. We thank you so much for your time. And if there's anything on our end we can do for you, let us know. And this has been great. So thank you so much.
Guys. Yeah, I'll have to come by next time I'm in the Adirondacks.
Definitely. Look us up. We'll meet up somewhere out there.
For sure.
Okay. Thanks, Alyssa.
Thank you.
Thanks.